Hello, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time to the Neuroinclusion conversations from across the pond and beyond. I'm Pasha Marlowe, co-hosting with Atif
Atif
Choudhury.
Choudhury.
Yay! We're trying to do this live, Atif. We're trying to do it live and streaming, and at the end of the conversation, we'll bring everyone out and have a more collaborative conversation and be in the collective together. Do you want to start us off with intentions for the podcast today?
Yeah, sure. So this is a podcast that sprung off really from the previous one that Pasha and I did, which was re recorded but not live. And we decided it went so well, we're going to do a series of them and sort of build up a conversation. Um, it is really important why we are doing this as well. Why is this conversation called Across the Pond and Beyond? Which I think is a really good name. I really liked it. Pasha came up with that. But why is it that neurodiversity is being spoken from a US or UK context? I'll answer that to an extent, and we'll answer it consistently throughout this podcast, but we'll also emphasize on the beyond part as well, which is really, you know, the heartbeat to all of this. You know, that neurodiversity is a global conversation and it's a global reality and it affects global lives. But the power behind who gets to engage with it, who gets to dictate what it looks like, who gets to medicalize it, and who gets to provide technology and tools and even workplaces is from a UK and US interpretation massively.
Mhm.
And that has ramifications on how we get to show up. It has ramifications on migrants and how they feel safe in the conversation of neurodiversity. And it has ramifications on how the world even understands neurodiversity.
Mhm.
Is it really just a concept made by Americans and UK people? Is it really only going to be defined for Eurocentrism? These are the big questions that we're going to be asking the audience for you guys to engage with us, to join us in the sincerity of that, to tear your hair out with us. I've already torn mine, right? um, and just, but also we're going to offer a lot of what we like to call, and I'm sure you've heard the term glimmers, you know, and it's a moment of just positive light, you know, a glimmer of light. And so to do that, every session will finish with the intention of asking what keeps us hopeful this week. It could be things that we've seen, it's felt, but it's really important to share what keeps us hopeful, why it keeps us hopeful, um, and how it reflects on you. But it's also an invitation for us to go as sincere as we need to do, because if we know we're going to finish on a glimmer, then we have a responsibility to sit with social justice and to be a part of an invitation to the voices that struggle to tell these stories. So we're going to do both. I hope that lands really well. And as I said, this podcast, the intention is to grow as many voices as possible. Pasha and I will have guests joining us in time. But for now, it's more the two of us in a way. If I may say, Pasha, it's a bit like learning to dance for a ballroom, do you know, or a competition. We're finding our feet, you know.
Yes.
I hope that works for you. That's how I'm sort of looking at it.
I love that. And I love your tender heart and your global perspective. And I wore my glimmery jacket to
Yeah.
remind myself. It's got sequins all over it for those that cannot see it. It's I because my tendency is sometimes to get very intense and I forget about sometimes bringing in the hope and the light. And so I very much appreciate that perspective. I do also want to start by saying that in the first podcast we mentioned, but that neurodiversity is the diversity of not just brains, it's minds, it's nervous systems. And so when we talk about any of these topics, we talk about it through the lens of neurodiversity, which is not just cognitive diversity. It is a diversity of minds, nervous systems, how we move, love, emote, stim, communicate, socialize, on and on. And so it's quite a broad conversation that we want to continue to expand beyond and beyond and beyond.
Hmm. I could
Mhm.
listen to you all day. Really good. Um, Actually, I might just. So one of the feedbacks we got from the last podcast was that, and then it was a really nice thing actually, but it was to say that we didn't speak much about ourselves, which I thought that was a joyful thing to hear. Um, we're in a time of identity politics and moral outrage and I guess moral injury too at times. So
Mhm.
often people wear their identity, particularly when they've struggled to
Mhm.
get a diagnosis or struggled to find meaning in the way they communicate,
Mhm.
that they wear that as a badge, you know? If
Mhm.
someone say, I'm gay, I'm out, I'm proud, it's a big thing to say
Mhm.
when people need to say it, and neurodiversity is the same.
Mhm.
I don't have to say I'm a person of color out loud. It's pretty obvious. But what's not always obvious is what does that mean in neurodiversity world?
Mhm.
You know, that might not be obvious, you know. Um,
Mhm.
but before we get into anything like that, I want to ask you, Pasha, what do you think about the last podcast and in terms of
Mhm.
could we and should we have said something more about ourselves? And because I'm going to probably ask you a little bit about yourself.
Well, I do want to say that diagnoses and disclosure intersect with privilege, and some people do not have the privilege to mask or the privilege to not disclose. And so I think it's just always important to call that out. And I'm fine. I'm fine sharing. I just always want to share my identity and my background in service to the conversation. And I forget what I do sometimes. Sometimes at the end of a presentation or keynote, I forget to say what services I offer, what books I've written. It's just not always in the forefront of my mind. Hello, ADHD, right? And
Mm.
I identify with ADHD, autism, and a whole lot of trauma and anxiety as well, all forms of neurodivergence. So those would be the neurodivergent identities or neurotypes, I suppose, that I would identify with. But honestly, if somebody were to ask me, who are you? I wouldn't say initially I am an autistic woman, for example, and I probably wouldn't even say I'm a white autistic woman from the United States, which right now is regretful. But I might say I'm a mother and just a deeply feeling human who most times feels like an alien on this planet because I don't align with most of the way the world is working right now. So that would be how I identify. I identify as a mother alien today.
I love that, Mother Alien. I want to ask you so much, but I'm going to start gently with actually, in terms of you mentioned being ADHD and autistic and
Yeah.
a mother.
Yeah.
This is intersectionality, right? These are the different intersects in which we show up.
Mhm.
Um, and I want to know more about your services and what you do in America, particularly. But before I ask that part, let me ask you on a personal level, how do you know when autism is showing up or ADHD is showing up? And they're both a clash of civilizations in many lives, do you know? I might just
Yeah,
elaborate on that in a
clash.
second.
Clash is a
Yeah.
nice word to start with. Yeah, and so many share the that neurotype combo, autism and ADHD. For me, my ADHD shows up in the morning when I come downstairs almost every day, and I say something like, "I have a good idea," or "I just thought of the best new business I could create," or "I'm going to start a new podcast," or "I have another idea for a book," and then that's common with ADHD, just, the ideas and spontaneity and the in innovation, which is beautiful. But my autism like follows through. My autism is like, you said a thing, and so it has to happen. That loop must close now, which leads to a lot of overworking. And by the way, in the lens of capitalism, exploitation of autistic people's productivity, but that's another conversation. But I will work 80 hours plus a week every week and do because I often just hyper focus until the loop is closed. If I say I'm going to write a book, pretty much that day I'm starting to write a book and I'm going to not stop until that book is done. That is a disability.
Yeah. 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 So does it fall in that order that the idea and the ADHD on fire, and then the autism hyperfocus is that in that order?
To me, it is. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. That's
Different
interesting.
for everyone. Different for everyone, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. I mean, for me, I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic, and the dyspraxia I can mostly handle. Driving, I'm fine. I'm cautious. I'm not a fast driver. I'm not a slow one, but I'm cautious.
Mm.
Definitely not a coordinated one, and it's hard for men to admit that.
Mm.
It's very hard for men to be saying, "Well, I'm really great at driving." I said, "Well, am I? Not really. Am I bad? No, I've not had an accident, but am I like I was never playing games, computer games, driving or football. So I've never been coordinated particularly, but it's not worried me that much. What's always worried me is dyslexia, you know,
Mm. Mhm.
spelling,
Mhm.
getting the ideas out, navigating those ideas.
Yeah.
They've all played a real role in how I show up. ADHD is definitely there, and I think if I was younger, I would probably been diagnosed with ADHD instead of dyslexia. But in
Mhm.
truth, I'm not sure which one starts and which one ends.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm not sure they're more responses, and sometimes those responses are natural, fair responses, and some of them
Mhm.
they're not. Some of them are just deeply reactive responses to
Mhm.
fatigue and human tiredness, which we all have.
Yeah.
And sometimes they might be the rejection dysphoria responses, they might be the ADHD responses. I don't actually know. And I've been doing this work for 30 years, and I definitely would say comfortably, I do not know in the moment.
Mhm.
And those listening,
Mhm.
be gentle on yourselves because
Mhm.
maybe you don't know in the moment, but I can know in reflection. I can know later in the day. I can sort of
Mhm.
look back and think, okay, that was great. You didn't give
Mhm.
yourself credit for that. That was great.
Mhm.
Or, yeah, that was totally, you know, your reaction to something that wasn't even happening. You know?
I do. And I think it's cultural and relational as well. I think in my country, hearing voices, for example, is pathologized and stigmatized and seen as negative. And if in the culture and society you live in, what you experience is seen as negative and the narrative is negative, you might then experience it more negatively. And so I think here, if there's and there's a lot of pathologization and discrimination against ADHD and autistic people, and so then it leads to feeling more negative about it sometimes, depending on the context of who I'm talking to or what I allow into my
Mhm.
consciousness. And same with relationally. I find like when I'm talking with you, I feel completely alive, lit up, my best and truest self, and I don't feel disabled at all. And even if some of my quirks show up, it's actually I already feel in the presence of you the psychological safety to just be it. And it's actually just celebrated and is. But if you put me in a room networking with corporate executives, I all of a sudden that's where the alien in me shows up.
Yeah,
I don't feel like I belong at all. And so I feel like it's so contextual to culture and society and relational aspects. Does that make sense?
absolutely. So again, for folks listening, this might relate. A lot of things that Pasha and I are going to talk about, some will have answers, some won't. Some will have just shared experiences.
Hmm.
What I'm really interested in is, I suppose, is how do we look at that? Because we are practitioners of a kind. We
Hmm.
work in this field supporting marginalized experiences for people,
Hmm.
many who face traumas. And we're that good at it, not despite sharing these experiences, but because of them,
Hmm.
but through them, you know.
Hmm.
But sometimes I'll quickly be reminded I'm still that 13-year-old kid who is lost in the classroom. I can go to conferences and feel that, and I'm about to speak at it, you know. And and then other times I think, no, this is just groovy. This is totally my thing, you know.
I say that
But
to my clients often. I've been a therapist for over 32 years, and I say, we're all just little kids walking around trying to figure out how to do this humaning,
yeah,
this adulting. We're all just little kids. Even the people, the leaders and the ones in power and the ones who are so corrupt and dangerous right now. Sometimes I actually try to find pictures. Like I try to find childhood or baby pictures of Trump to find
yeah,
some
yeah,
understanding or less rage
yeah,
and and try to like bring it to a human level because we've all been children who I believe all children were born, good and
yes, yes, yeah,
wise, and we lose that over time.
yeah, yeah. Pasha, you've segued brilliantly into the next stage of this. And look, folks, this is live, and we're just gonna. They'll always be live as much as we can. But Pasha mentioned Trump there, and we talked a little bit about Trump last week.
Mhm.
Um, and for those who weren't there, Pasha's right. We are all born innocent. Um, I find that hard to go to in my place, not just on Trump, but perhaps if I just stay on him for a second. His father was a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Mhm.
Um, it sounded like his father was abusive as a
Mhm.
human being and
Mhm.
perhaps as a husband, but certainly as a father.
Mhm.
And then Trump lost his older brother.
Yeah.
So this has a lot to do with the makeup of traumas and how people experience them. But I'm not his psychologist or even his neurodiversity support worker. But I do know that people in leadership have huge ramifications when they don't do the work
Mhm.
to look at their own central nervous systems,
Mhm.
to look at their own power, to look at their own neurodiverse issues, but also their unresolved traumas. Inherently, by not doing that work, they will bleed over their own children. They'll continue to bleed over themselves.
Mhm.
And in some cases, they become powerful enough to bleed all over the world.
Yeah.
And this is an example.
Yeah.
I am conscious that I'm speaking in London, in Brighton, in the UK, and I'm talking to Pasha in Maine. But Trump isn't just president of America, he largely is a policymaker for the planet.
Yeah.
So I am going to take a moment here for those of you listening to think about what we're watching in the world. And when Patrick and I talk about this, we want to bring politics into the world because it is about reality and it's about people and how they show up in it. But when we're going to do it, our goal is to leave you with something that doesn't reinforce despair, but rather keeps you hopeful.
Mhm.
But as I was saying earlier, in each of these sessions, we'll have a section on it, which really is about politics. I am watching the changes in the war in Iraq and sorry, in Iran. And I'm also finding myself very nervous about the state of the world through multiple wars. And I think if people are watching that and feeling it, that would be okay. It'd be okay to feel it.
Absolutely.
Pasha, what's your thoughts on this in terms of where we're at?
Yeah, and I love looking at this through the lens of neurodiversity and nervous systems. In my work in the mental health profession, what I'm finding is so many of my clients are coming to me feeling dysregulated, emotionally dysregulated, and to which I say, as you should be, because we live in a
Mm.
dysregulated, disabling, disorderly world.
Yeah.
And um, also an existential crisis, I think, is happening. What is the direction of the world? Should we have children and bring them into this world? Will our work matter? Will our work exist with AI in 5 or 10 years? There's a lot of this, like, what is happening and what is the purpose and what is my place? Existential crisis and existential dread going on, and I'm seeing and people feeling also quite low in capacity to navigate it. And so this is where I feel like it's so important to lean into conversations and community and connections with other people who feel this way as well, because if we feel lonely in that, it's even more terrifying. And and to bring that hope into the conversation, like acknowledging the traumas and the realities and the oppression and the dangers that are going on, but also to recognize uh, how how together, collaboratively and collectively, is our way forward to to navigate it right now, to but also to hopefully, heal from it and change and learn from it, hopefully
Mhm.
in the future.
I think that's absolutely great. So it really is important that we take a deep breath here. So much about neurodiversity, I think, or neurodivergence, as many people would call it. And as we grow into this conversation, I'll perhaps share more why I find that challenging. But
Mhm.
I am also really excited that we are here in a space talking about, finally, for many people, to hear a conversation of a person of color, talking to a person in America, you know, and what does it mean as
Mhm.
migrants? What does it mean
Mhm.
when you're afraid of these labels?
Mhm.
What does it mean when you're desperate for them?
Mhm.
Do you know? And
Mm.
what does it mean when a society or a workplace just isn't ready for it?
Yeah.
Um, I am really, I mean, I was enamored to do this work and I first met Pasha and I thought Pasha's work is so important to pay attention to. Her book is really important. And I really think so much more about that all of us are experiencing life at speed that perhaps our ancestors were never built for.
Yes.
Perhaps we were, even our own parents were not built for.
Mhm. Our nervous
And so
systems were not built for it.
our
Just in
nervous
general.
system, yeah,
Our nervous
yeah.
systems were not built and designed to handle what we're handling right now. Yes.
It's, it's really true.
Hmm.
Uh, And we are now at a speed in which our children process information or expected to through
Hmm.
social media, through news.
Hmm.
There was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, it could be even 50 years ago, when your neighbor is needing help, you can feel it.
Yeah.
And when you hear information, what's happening in your local area, it was the
Mm.
information you got.
Mm.
Occasionally, maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you heard the world news
Mm.
on the radio.
Mm.
Wasn't that long ago, 60, 70 years ago, we were not listening. 60 years ago, we were not watching TV. We were
Mm.
getting news on the radio and we were tuning in or tuning out. But we did
Mm.
not have a device that constantly bombarded us.
Mm.
What we should care about, who we should be angry about,
Mm.
why they've done this, why you should buy this, what
Mm.
makes you not good enough.
Mm.
The speed in which that is coming at us
Mm.
and our children
Yeah.
is deeply profound.
Yeah.
So again, I say, if you are feeling dysregulated by that, you're not alone, but it
No.
feels lonely, as
Yes.
Pasha said.
Yes.
So
Yes.
again, we're going to go back to the theme of this podcast that we will pick political events
Mhm.
and sit with them. We won't necessarily find an answer to fully address them,
Mhm.
but it's very difficult, I think, and I share this with my heart. It's very difficult for me to think about what my mental and emotional needs are when I'm so deeply connected to the physical loss of people or the physical loss of watching the news and people losing their children. And here I am wanting to talk about dyslexia. Now,
Mm.
I know that sounds a little bit challenging because we shouldn't have a hierarchy in suffering. What we should have is a connectedness.
Mhm.
But I often find many podcasts or discussions on neurodiversity, they reinforce the Eurocentrism of who gets to matter
Mhm.
and what issues matter
Mhm.
whilst the world is on fire,
Mhm.
very close to the fence that we're in. Do you know?
Yes, I think that's why I hesitate to share those identities of ADHD and autism, because that is the majority of the conversation and the narrative. And I think it's in disservice to the neurodiversity movement to specifically only talk about a couple neurotypes or even neurotypes in general versus what I think you and I are starting to talk about is more collectively neurodiversity, the diversity of all human minds, all human nervous systems, and how we all interact together, and how, of course, we should all have equitable opportunity to survive and thrive in the world, but that's not the case because of systems of oppression. And that calling that out and getting to the root of it, the stigma, the bias, the racism, ableism, sexism, saneism, capitalism, all of it, is a more productive. If you want to talk about productivity, which is what the workplace loves to talk about, I feel like that's a more productive conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas I've learned with Grace and Pasha, you remind me of it a lot. Just what feminine energy can do you know? But how little we hear it
Mm,
or how we become deaf to it. I know that I was, and I never really thought about it. I think, well, that's women's voices. And I said, it is, but
mm,
it's also a nurturing voice.
mm,
And you don't hear it that often. Not really. You can
mm,
hear women trying to, especially mothers, fighting hard for their children, you
mm-hmm,
know,
mm-hmm,
but that nurturing voice is very difficult, and you have to tune into it, especially for a lot of men. I know that I do, and I realize when I'm not hearing it enough. I
mm,
realize when I've heard it, I thought, oh, God, yeah, absolutely. Because, like I said, power dictates, and that could be misogyny, it could be
mm-hmm,
patriarchy,
yeah,
but essentially, it's male power dictating the terms of engagement,
mm-hmm,
largely anywhere in the world,
mm-hmm,
everywhere in the world.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And,
Agreed.
and crikey, folks, and I speak to my fellow men, we're missing a lot, you know, a lot. I mean, and not only are we missing things that prevents us from allowing women's contributions to be seen or heard, but we're doing harm to ourselves
Mm-hmm.
in just not hearing it.
Yeah,
And I think I'm going back to neurodiversity in the same space that it's the same thing for me.
yeah,
It's deeply interconnected, that it is not about deficits and disorders. And then we're going to spend some more time really knuckling down why the US uses deficit and disorder narratives and why the UK, even when it doesn't so much, it still does in many places when it chooses to,
mm-hmm,
and what the consequences of that are, how
mm-hmm,
that robs us of things. But
mm-hmm.
I want to think about something that I reminded the room of, and then use go back to Pasha with the conversations of power and healthy participation. But I do a lot of work in Palestine, and I saw some writing on the wall in Palestine, which really moved me. And it wasn't, there was a lot of writing, and there's a lot of reasons to be so angry about walls, wherever they are in the world,
Yeah.
when they're reinforcing tyranny and oppression. But on this wall, it was written, the words was, if you've come here to save me, then go home.
Mm,
You're wasting your time.
mm,
And I said, but if you've come here to understand that your liberation is deeply connected to mine, then let us talk. Let us talk. And that just stayed with me forever. That my liberation is deeply, whether I live 7,000 miles away from this, or in London or UK, or I'm living in Israel, or I'm living under the other side of that wall in Palestine, my liberation is deeply connected to whoever wrote that, you know? And of course it is. I cannot be healthy in misogyny. I cannot be healthy. So this goes back to the theme of this across the pond and beyond.
yeah.
Pasha, for you, what's your hopes in this? That those listening to it, are they listening to this about neurodiversity?
Mm-hmm,
I guess so.
mm-hmm.
But are they listening to something more? And are we going to give them something more?
Yeah. w- Often what I refer to when I hear about your liberation is deeply connected to mine is this idea of interconnectedness, and which I think we lose over. We're more connected and more disconnected than ever. You know, we can know what's going on in Palestine and feel more disconnected from it than we would have before. There's a dehumanization and desensitization that's going on. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah.
Um, on the whole, that's very concerning to me. And I think it is tied all into neurodiversity. I think neurodiversity is about collective liberation of all
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And, you know, at its root, we are all different and we are all as one, right?
But do you, I'm with you 100%, which is why I enjoy this and enjoy this. And Honestly, if nobody come and listen to this, I'd still do this just to have
But
this
I have to
conversation.
tell you, Zara is there. I'm sorry. Yeah, Zara is there and sending hearts to you when you say
Okay.
things. And I
Okay.
also know to anyone listening, we're going over time as we knew we
Yeah.
would. But it was so it's scheduled for half an hour and we'll probably go more like 40, 45. But so just naming that for those that are there. And thank you everybody who's watching if miraculously technology is working and being able to witness this. And for those that are in the Zoom, if you want to write anything in chat or ask a question, that's possible, and we could actually respond to it live. We're still working out the kinks of live
We're learning.
podcasting.
Yeah, we're
But you're getting lots of hearts, is what I was saying. So you're not
brilliant.
speaking to the void.
No, that's okay. That's okay. This is good. This is there's a show called Strictly Come Dancing here in the UK. I don't know if you've got it in America, but
No.
um they just practice for competition, ballroom dancing. And I think that's what we're doing. So I agree with you on collective liberation. I have a question and then I'll move us to somewhere else that's hopeful. But I have a question. Do you believe our movement is on the same page as you or me?
No. I think we've gone awry. It perhaps start
Yeah.
I don't even know if it started exactly that way, to be honest. But having just come out of Neurodiversity Celebration Week,
Okay.
where most people
Yeah.
were not very celebratory and quite disappointed with how the week went,
Mhm.
specifically in the workplace. The conversation that I'm seeing on LinkedIn is that most people are quite disappointed in the lack of action, in the lack of accountability, in the lack of continued efforts before and beyond a week, and also what it even means. What are we celebrating? And so I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think it's hindering the neurodiversity movement or progress or neuroinclusive progress or whatever people hope to vision for the future. I think the confusion is a barrier to that. And yeah. So I would love to get into that.
Well, let's do that for the next ones. We're gonna get a bit more, gonna get a bit more rigid on those things. So let me ask you. So on that sense, I think about that, and my opinion changes depending on, I think, the week I'm having,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I don't know what that says about dopamine hits and serotonin, and for myself.
Hmm.
I thought this was a great neurodiversity celebration week this year for
Good.
me
Good.
and for many others. But I speak on a personal level that I got to do things a little bit on TV, but also seeing something for the neurodiversity in the city, the Square Mile, City of London.
Hmm.
And when I was 16, I barely could make eye contact with people, and I was so petrified people would see I don't spell. I used to really navigate where I sit and my adjustments and who would see, as if everyone was obsessed with seeing my handwriting. Nobody
Mm,
was, you know?
mm, mhm,
Um, and they went on like that for 5 years for me.
mm,
And so then here I am watching the City Corporation of London doing a celebration of neurodiversity called the City Belonging Project and neurodiversity in the city. And it's happening. And I think I used to work here. Like,
mm,
what I hear I am talking openly on television or on a video or whatever about those days. And yet I never would have told a single person for 5 years. Some of them I really cared about. I would not
mm,
dare tell them, hey, I don't spell. I really struggle to read. My
mhm,
handwriting is illegible. That's why I'm really slow here.
mhm,
I know you think I'm really good at meetings, but you don't really let me just do the meetings. You make me do all the admin. That's fine. That's my job.
mhm.
But I just didn't know how to tell you because I didn't even know have a word for it myself, do you know? And
Yeah.
so to see that is a really big deal on this celebration week. But you're right. I have a challenge to you as an audience as well. That like anything truly beautiful, we birth it through a lot of pain, do you know?
Mhm,
And I don't think we're yet to see what neurodiversity looks like.
mhm,
We're yet to see what the pain of it truly looks like. I know there's going to be people really annoyed with me going, how dare you? You don't know what pain I'm in. But I'm asking that we have yet to truly see what this looks like for people looking at it from social economics,
Hmm.
from their poverty realities,
Hmm.
from people affected by traumas and war and refugee camps with post-traumatic stress
Hmm.
and that neurodiversity of that.
Hmm.
And then why wouldn't autistic people be anywhere else in the world, not just in the US or the UK? Why wouldn't those realities also be refugees? Why wouldn't they also be on the run?
Hmm.
Why wouldn't they also be in tyranny or fear of wars that they never started,
Hmm.
and missiles they never asked for?
Hmm.
All these things are living here, and we're about to find out truly what neurodiversity can look like, deserves to look like, and needs to look like. But for us to do that, I think we're going to have to get a whole lot more uncomfortable with the conversation and the urgency of it in order to celebrate it.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's saying too much, but I generally mean that.
Yeah, I feel that. When I think about neurodiversity, I think of it as a fact.
Yes.
Neurodiversity is a fact that there's a diversity of minds. When I think about neuroinclusion, which might be more what you were referring to, I think it's we're not there yet.
Yes.
And it's about systems of power and oppression and some people not having access to care and some people not having access to support and also not having the ability to even access the information about it. And
Mhm.
so, it's challenging on a global scale, but neuroinclusion implies that there's somebody in power who's including a person. And so I think I said this last time, the word even trips me up sometimes because are we working towards inclusion? Are we working towards neuroinclusion where people in power include neurodivergent people, for example? Or are we working for inclusion to just be part of reality, just like neurodiversity is real, just like neurodiversity just exists? Does inclusion just exist? That we're all included. And so yeah, sometimes the words themselves, this is the autism, the words themselves sometimes make me wonder what are we working towards? What is the vision we're working towards? And what do we call that? And if we call that neurodiversity celebration, does that make sense? And if we call it
Yes.
neuroinclusion, does that make sense?
I, I agree because it's beautiful, isn't it? We're at a crossroads between everyday belonging,
Hmm.
you know, and it just being a fabric of our civil societies wherever they are.
Right.
The idea that human beings and human brains just function with joy, celebration, anguish, and differences. They just
Hmm.
always have done.
Hmm.
There's not an innovation in the world that isn't born out of differences, you
Hmm.
know. But we have also historically, as we've seen, particularly in the US and particularly in the UK, seen a regimented version of power and what is acceptable and what is not,
Hmm.
what is welcomed and what is not, what
Hmm.
is productive and what is not,
Hmm.
and what is uniformed and measurable and what is not.
Hmm.
And in those things, we've built concepts and constructed societies through. This is going to be the theme of the next sessions as we go through this.
Hmm.
But I have a question is despite those things, and perhaps I'm boldly asking something that's a lot here, but I feel sometimes I don't live in a country, I live in an economy. I don't think that anyone lives in a country.
Hmm.
A country is a construct, a concept, you know. Um,
Hmm.
we live in
Hmm.
economies. And in those economies, we get to understand this is neurodiversity. Okay.
Yeah.
This is neurodivergence. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the right kind of
Hmm.
dyslexic, talented
Hmm.
ADHD genius. Okay. This
Hmm.
is the wrong kind. Okay.
Hmm.
This is the ADHD autistic genius that we've been talking about and showcasing. Okay. And so we can go on.
Hmm. The constructed norms.
Yes.
It almost ties back to the alien. I promise this will make sense. But sometimes I imagine, because I'm an alien, floating above the earth, looking down on the earth, where, of course, barriers and country lines and race and disability, like all of it, we're just as one, this one planet. And I know that sounds very idealistic and Pollyannish and romantic, blah, blah, blah. But that's the hope for me is this when we zoom out to all countries, all of Earth, all humans, all nervous systems, all souls, all ancestors, and beyond and beyond and beyond, then it makes sense to just love everyone, just no matter who they are, just to be just to be with each other and help each other and to not and judgments aside and norms aside. And I know that's not the world we live in and will likely not be the world either of us ever see. But when you ask me what brings me hope or keeps me in the game or gives me perspective, I almost sometimes actually look at photographs of the earth from far away.
Well,
Does that
well,
make sense?
yes, it does. Pasha, you're awesome. I mean, really. Um, it's if those of you who haven't seen it, do look at a thing called Carl Sagan, the pale blue dot. But it's really a way of seeing the world, which is a tiny pale blue dot. Um, I can say a lot about. What gives me hope is it's conversations like this that we can talk about intersectionality. We can see it measured, and we can recognize the depth of what's ahead of it when we're going to talk not so much about neurodivergency, but rather what does healthy participation look like?
Hmm.
Not so much about autism or ADHD or dyslexia, not because it's wrong,
Right.
because it tells us something, but not everything.
Hmm.
So what does everyday belonging look like?
Hmm.
Do you know? Um, what this week or last week rather, I had the joy of going to a Chinese autism conference, and I met a lovely lady called Hazel Lim who worked tirelessly to put this conference on. And I've never seen the experiences of Chinese single, so many of them single moms telling a story of autism and shame and taboo, and especially in the context of non-verbal children,
Hmm.
and how hard it is to share that story and get support in a community,
Hmm.
and even share a story back home in China to grandparents who worship these kids but for financial reasons aren't able to see them regularly, but then come to realize that they are non-verbal and the grandparents haven't seen the kids because of the fear of what it means. These things are deeply profound. And yet I saw a conference in the Welsh Parliament where Wales was saying, we welcome this conversation.
Hmm.
The Welsh Parliament and Chinese autistic campaigners
Hmm.
were taking these social taboos and really
Hmm.
sitting with the psychological well-being of what is needed for mothers to feel supported,
Wow.
what is needed for migrant communities to understand how to support each other,
Hmm.
and what they hope might influence Chinese society in time.
Mm.
And it
Beautiful.
gave me a lot of hope,
That's
you
beautiful.
know.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure I could have imagined that
Hmm.
even 2 years ago, you know.
Hmm. That's progress. Hmm.
Yeah.
That is so.
So I think there'll be more folks looking at the social model of what we're talking about,
Hmm.
recognizing the urgency
Hmm.
and taking on this conversation of across the pond and beyond. Do you know?
Yes. Yes. I do hope. I love it. I know that we're almost at time.
Oh, so
Was
yeah,
that your
yeah,
final?
yeah. That was me just saying goodbye,
I love
finishing,
it.
but yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love it. Um, Assuming all this worked, well, we would love to know if it worked. If you happen to have been able to tune in through LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook or beyond, that would be amazing to know. Also, if there's anything you would like us to address in the podcast, because we want you to be part of the conversation. And this will be posted to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon, apparently.
Okay.
I don't know what else, but anyhow, I'm just so glad to have these conversations with you. And even if no one was listening, Atif, I would want to meet with you every week because you bring me hope. So thank
Oh, let's see. Okay,
you.
folks. Well, look, isn't that wonderful? Pasha, thank you so much. Have a really lovely week. All of you, look after your tender hearts. You have them, hold them close. And we're going to get through this. We're going to get through more than this, and we're going to build through this. It's what we do. Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.